Welcome to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we explore the strategies, the insights, and the best practices that help families and their advisors build and manage successful family offices. I am your host, Christi Van Rite, and each episode we dive into the key elements of running a family office. Whether you're a family looking to structure your advisory team for long-term success, or you're a professional managing the complexities of a multi-generational enterprise. From financial oversight and operational efficiency to selecting the right advisors and creating a lasting legacy, this podcast is here to provide practical guidance and expert perspectives. Let's get started. All right. Welcome back to the Family Office Success Podcast, where we talk all things family office. Today, we are joined by Miss Savannah Suttle, and I am so excited to introduce you to her. There's a half a chance you've run across her already, and if so, you know how awesome she is. If not, here is your introduction to Savannah. I can't wait to get started today. So, Savannah happens to be a third-generation family office member, a former therapist, and a serial entrepreneur, which we all love, and as well, a seasoned executive with a very deep understanding of multi-generational wealth and governance and family dynamics. She is currently the CEO of Schema Consulting and works with family enterprises. She holds a master's in marriage and family therapy from Reformed Theological Seminary, and her unique perspective is really shaped by her early career as a therapist specializing in family systems, multi-generational dynamics, and crisis intervention. She helps families reduce conflict, increase the fun they're having, and learn how to collaborate in harmony, which we are all looking to do. Whether she's facilitating a family enterprise retreat, launching a new venture, or assembling the perfect advisory team, she's got a really unique ability to bring people together and foster alignment and create lasting impact for families. She absolutely has a reputation for high discretion and confidentiality, and really is the trusted architect behind family offices, governance structures, and entrepreneurial ventures that help enable a family to really thrive across generations. Her sweet spot is helping families use entrepreneurship to strengthen their bonds, instill values, and build character, all the while creating amazing things together and learning how to truly live for a living, which just, quite frankly, Savannah, sounds incredible. So much fun. So much fun. Thank you so much for being with us today. I am super excited to have this conversation. So let's just jump in because we have a lot to talk about. Awesome. So I was hoping we could start with kind of talking about some of the how you manage relationship capital inside of a family or a family office, because so often we hear about family offices getting a little stagnant, and families they either kind of silo into each other or into themselves, and they're just not sure how to come back to the table and really figure out how to work together. So talk to me a little bit about how you define that, and what are some of the risks about that, and what are the strategies that families can use to avoid the things that nobody really, that we all want them to avoid?
Sure. So, when you think about a family office, I think one of the common misconceptions that people have is that it is just primarily focused on finance or administration or, kind of serving the needs of the family, et cetera. And they forget the whole family aspect of it. Like the growth pattern of family offices is typically something around the lines of, you start with some family businesses that kind of grow and grow and grow. And then you realize that you've got a lot of administrative management that you've got to keep up with, either this entity and the family entity, the multiple generations. Maybe your estate planner, maybe your business attorney is kind of also serving some other personal needs, or maybe your business accountant is also kind of filing your personal tax returns, and that kind of stuff. And at some point, especially across generations, that model you kind of start to outgrow it. And you have to create a separate entity to help herd all the cats. The reason that people kind of draft and design and grow these things is usually it's pretty organic until it gets to the point where organic is unmanageable and then they have to become
Right.
strategic. And that's true for,
That's right.
longer standing families of means, multi-generational stuff. Right now you're seeing kind of a trend with maybe people who have come into wealth through tech exits, or you've got your Bitcoin bazillionaires, and they have the opportunity to design more strategically from scratch. But historically, that's really not the case, right? Most of the time. And so what happens is these families will have to kind of assemble their teams based on who they know, because they don't know how to build a family office. It's their first time to build one. And so over time, especially, because of the nature of families being families, you've got all kinds of crazy stuff that happens in there. And you want to make sure that so and so is not going to be phased by the fact that your kid, you've got one kid who's going to Harvard and doing all the great stuff, and you got another kid who's partying hard and you're worried about a cocaine addiction. So
Yep.
you
That's
you
right.
want to make sure that the people that you work with are trustworthy, that they're not going to try to take advantage of said kid with said cocaine addiction, right? But also that they are going to be pretty unflappable. So people start with, of course, relationship. Who do I already know? Who have I already been through this with? Who kind of gets me, right? And people start building relationship intuitively that way. Now you know how to do this because, I mean, as any person who's even not just who's just not a hermit, we tend to build relationship organically. The problem is that when you start building family offices and enterprises, that relationship is the kind of core element of resilience over time. It's going to, like, yes, money's important, but you can make a lot of money and then blow it all on attorney fees because your kids don't get along.
Happens all the
Knowing, like, okay, you're really good at this and I'm really good at that, and you're really good at this other thing over here. Now how do we all combine? How do we operate more like a jazz band and less like, a cacophony of crazy people who are all trying to toot their own horns?
Yeah.
The ability to invest in that type of relationship is the thing that kind of makes or breaks you. But historically, we as a species build very organically, and we are now having to build more intentionally because of the finiteness of time, the fact that we're also geographically strung out, the fact that most of the time we're not even communicating in person anymore, we're having to do things virtually. We have to be really intentional about how we build that. But people don't necessarily know how to flip that switch. They know perfectly how to build financial capital. They don't necessarily know how to build relationship capital.
Yeah.
So that's where I come in and help people kind of understand, okay, how are you getting along? How do you build that? And not just within your own family, but with the team that you're building in terms of serving your family. How are you establishing trust? How are you getting to know people? How are you choosing your team? And how are you choosing to coordinate together?
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, you hit on something that we talk about a lot, which is families know how to build wealth. I'm not even say that there's a manual to that, but there are certainly lots of places you can go to get advice and learn how to build a business and do well. There's not a lot of places you can go that really guide you on you've built the business of the business.
Mm.
How do you build the business of the family? And how do you run the business of the family? So I love that that is the position that you have taken in this market, is to truly help families. What are you good at? And who else do you need on the team to make sure that this runs and does what you want it to do?
Yeah. It's so
Yeah.
awesome because so frequently, how I got started in all of this was by seeing that there was that gap, in having previously worked as a therapist. I would have family businesses, like families who would come in who had a family business. They'd come try to
Hmm.
work on stuff in my office. And then they'd literally go back to their home office where they had cemented their dysfunction into their operating procedures. And it was like, okay, look, I love that y'all are trying to work on trust and communication and openness and transparency, but yet you've literally told your entire staff 10 years ago, hey, don't let the kids see the P&L, right? But now it's been 10 years, your kids are in sales and they are trying to figure out whether or not they're doing a good job. And you've forgotten that you gave that initiative to the staff.
But
The
they
staff,
didn't.
they didn't. And
Yeah.
so, what's happening here is we've got this kind of hidden, invisible friction where the kids are like, oh, my parents just don't even trust me enough to see the P&L. They don't want to even talk about finances. Parents are like, we forgot about that. Oh yeah, no big deal. You're 28. Let's go over this. Actually, it's about time. We probably should teach you how to read a P&L. And so you end up with these kind of unnecessary frictions because people aren't having the conversations. And a lot of times they don't even know that they need to have the conversations, but they
Right.
do know that they feel that emotional tug and pull where the kids
Yeah.
are like, when I started this. And so parents end up having this kind of internal narrative that goes on, but the kids develop that too, and they don't end up kind of cross pollinating and having those discussions. So I ended up working with families to kind of start having those discussions. But at the end of the day, if they didn't actually then go forth and change their operating procedures and change stuff in their business, it didn't matter. And sometimes, if they didn't change stuff in the business, but they did have the clear conversations, it actually kind of made it worse because now it's like, well, now you know what the deal is and you're still not willing to change, which is a whole different discussion altogether. But it's those kind of little things where I started realizing, okay, people need to be able to change stuff in the business. Who can I find in the marketplace that would be able to speak to these things? Because as a therapist, you just can't do all of it, right? So, I can help with the family stuff, but business stuff I need to pass off. But what I consistently found was that business consultants and advisors, ops would love to take care of the operations, but they didn't want to touch the family stuff with a 10-foot pole. So there
Yeah.
really is this unique convergence, and that's why I started Schema, was as a means of helping people kind of deal with that intersection, right? Because families have to live and breathe in that all the time. So to be able to kind of acknowledge that, coach that, and work through that, that's kind of the goal. And that's how you start kind of thinking through, hey, what is my relationship capital? What is my baseline with my family? So, for example, I talked to a guy recently who had established, many businesses, very wealthy, very, very wealthy, and had gotten into governance and planning his family office and his investment theses and all of those different things, was really solid on his capital strategy. And somebody at a dinner party said, hey, are you really articulate on these points? Are you as articulate about how you're passing that stuff on with your family? Are your
Mhm.
kids as versed in this, and how are you instilling that, and do you have like your mission, vision, values for your family and for like multiple generations? And he was really kind of struck. He was like, I don't. And that's because as an industry, right, of sorts, we're not
Mhm.
focusing there. We're focusing on the wealth generation, and we forget about the other aspects of capital, the social, the impact, the relationship capital that all comes with the other side of wealth, which is quality of life.
Yeah. That's so true. I mean, for every one of you, there are 10 of the operations. And there's nothing wrong with that because businesses need that. They need the
Mhm.
operational procedures and things to run smoothly. And you need that to run smoothly in the business of the family as well. So there's a place for both. But does it matter if you have all the wealth in the world, but you don't speak to your kids, or you're divorced several times because you can't figure out how to communicate
Mhm.
what may very well truly be super important to you, that you and your spouse are talking, and you and your kids are talking, but you don't have that skill set, or that's not something that comes naturally to you.
Mhm.
What are the dollars worth in that scenario?
Exactly. And even thinking about, okay, you can't take it with you. So at the end of the day, I was just reading through Ecclesiastes, and, it's talking about like, at the end of the day, you can't take it with you. It's toil. So you might pass on your stuff to people who didn't earn it, don't appreciate it, might just blow through it. And that's true. So how are you stewarding not just your wealth, but your values, your management style, and also just the fact that at the end of the day, how are you enjoying the people in your life, and how are they enjoying you?
Yeah.
We only have 24 hours in a day. Hopefully we're spending them doing something we like, doing them with people we like and love and care about. And even for the ones that we don't like, hopefully those are some character building relationships. So because, oh, God knows those are out there. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Yeah, love that. Love that. So, if you are working with an early stage family office, how because I know you've seen, kind of across the board. What do you see that, or do you see what kind of differs from an early stage family
Mhm.
office, one that's just getting started, to ones that are more well established in terms of family dynamics?
Main difference is, so I'm going to kind of separate these into a few buckets, kind of the early stage, emerging or embedded family offices, kind of developing family offices, which are been around a little while, but they're still kind of figuring things out. They might be in process. And then more mature family offices who've been around the block for 7 generations and, have made all the mistakes. So hopefully we don't have to. Uh, but for the early stage ones, what I frequently see, is usually Gen 1 and Gen 2, sometimes Gen 3, depends. And they are working through, they've really achieved wealth, right? But they've spent the last however many decades in that striving period, right? And so they get to a point where maybe they've had an exit, maybe, or they're thinking about succession planning or all of that kind of stuff. They're getting to a point where they're like, okay, there's a paradigm shift now. I've built my stuff. Now what? How do I, and now all of a sudden you've got kind of this big relationship. Oh man, I've put my marriage on hold for the last 20 years
Yeah.
and I'm still working all the time because I'm actually afraid that if I go home, I'm going to spend time with my wife and it's not, we're going to have to work on these things and I don't know how to do that. And things are going to fall apart and I'm going to end up with a divorce and I'm going to lose everything that I just spent the last 30 years building. So you know what? I'm actually just going to go ahead and build another business and keep things rocking and rolling and hope things work out. And so, I see a lot of that. I see a lot of families who, and even if the family is working well together, which is awesome and does happen more often than you'd expect. So the families are, as they've achieved their wealth, they're now looking at succession planning and maybe diversification. So
Okay.
one of the things I love about the family office structure is that you can, let's say that you've got an existing operating company, you flow through the wealth, and now you're managing it with a family office. Let's say you've got 4 kids, and one of them wants to be involved, and the other 3 do not, and in the operating company you now have an opportunity to provide either investment bank for them with using the family trusts. You can support them with the back end of the. Here's the you're a beneficiary, and here's how that is going to support you. But so allowing the family office structure as a means of creating and supporting further additional entrepreneurship is
Mm.
something that I love to encourage, particularly for those Gen 1 and Gen 2s who are trying to set it up for future generations where entrepreneurship is a real value or effort. As my dad puts it, I don't want y'all living lives of the rich and aimless. Like there's beauty and
It's
value in hard work and enjoying your life and pretty and figuring out what you're made of. And it really, it's true. That's doing the work is where your character building happens. And at the end of the day, it's really about that art of becoming. So that's one of
oh,
the things I see.
I love that. At the end of the day, it's about the art of becoming. That is really powerful. So where do you see some of the best practices that the generations passing the baton? Can you identify some of those best practices that
Yeah.
you've seen?
Kind of the way that things evolve, right? So
Mhm.
when you get to multiple generations, let's say you had granddad started the company and grandma's not particularly very involved, but she's been supportive. Now, second gen is involved. Maybe granddad is passed and grandma's still around. Now you've got grandchildren who are coming up. They're in college or just out of college and they're starting to participate and look at leadership roles. And now maybe they are having kids and they've got grandkids, etc. Well, you start seeing kind of the passage of these older generations as they are passing on or becoming less involved, and you see the operating companies continue to flourish. But the number of kids and stakeholders and cousins and all that may exceed. Well, not everybody's going to want to work in the family business, and if they did, good luck to you. That would just be a lot.
Be a
So
lot.
but not everybody's going to want to work in the operating company. And even if they work in the operating company, there becomes a question of, okay, well, little Susan has worked in the company for 20 years and she's no longer. How are you compensating, right? So in family businesses, that and not just with salaries, but also with dividends and estate planning and all that kind of stuff, you start looking at it more complexly. So people
Okay.
start shifting over to the longer term, to the family office model as a way to manage that equality and equity question, right? So that you can have equal distributions in the family office and in all the trust structures, or I mean, you don't have to have it equal, but you can. And then for whoever wants to participate in the operating company, they can choose that as a career path, but they then get to follow the same guidelines that everybody else at the company has to follow so that they're really the best fit and not just the nepotistic appointment. So that's one of the strategies that really helps people with making sure that your operating company is continuing to be best in class, that you're hiring the right people and not just family members, but that also family members don't feel jilted or like they aren't getting their rightful share. It
Sure.
also allows you to be a lot more creative with your assets and your wealth management in the family office side of things, that can again increase wealth independent of your operating company. So when I start looking at kind of these more mature family offices who are, is really more hearsay than experiential. And it's really become incumbent upon the subsequent generations and their advisors in order to pass on and bestow the values and the mission of those founders. If they had even really articulated it, usually they haven't. Most of the time, it's like, hey, these are our personalities and our guiding principles.
Sure.
And we want to make sure that everybody is respectful and gracious and, has a lot of initiative and, we're not easy quitters, whatever your family values are. Um, at the point where stewardship of those values starts to shift, and it's not just the individual values, but the family values, that's when it becomes necessary to start looking at things like governance and family retreats and having a family council and making sure that everybody is on the same page, right? And
Mm.
so there's kind of the practical nuts and bolts of how are we making sure that everybody is held according to the same standard, because that makes accountability a lot easier when you're having to say like, hey, look, I love that you want to do another thing and I love that you want to work with a family to do that, but your first startup, this is what happened and these are the guidelines we have for every startup, and you have to pay back whatever until you can move forward, right? For example, and saying it's not just you and it's not just because you're the son of the black sheep and we're out to get you. No, like it's because you took a bunch of money and you wasted it and you haven't recompensated the fund. So, you know, that's fine. We did the same thing for so and so over here. And this is just how we roll. So
Yeah.
in a way, by creating structure within that family office context for the family members, you create structure for relationship so that you can have clear conversations, clear accountability, clear expectations. And everybody then knows, like, hey, look, these are the rules of the game. Let's all play this game together. Or not. They can bench themselves. That's fine. But they can't come into the game and then try to change all the rules. Does that make sense?
And it does. I love that concept that the structure itself really can help facilitate a family's, I mean, communication on one level, but just because I've seen so many families over the years that get sideways. Some people, they split, they get sideways from each other because there's not there's different expectations,
Mhm.
and well, I'm not getting treated the same here, and you spend a bunch of money on them because they had to go to rehab. What, I'm getting punished because I didn't have to go to rehab for a problem? I mean, you see that all the time.
All the time.
Not that that's a real scenario, but it happens, and it's so easy if the family office, the matriarch, the patriarch, the folks at the top of running it all, if they don't have something to fall back on, those are really hard to come out of. Well, I hear, well, life's not fair. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
okay, but maybe we can do better than that.
Yes.
So having a structure, I love that structure, that the family office can support the family members, ongoing generations for those who don't want to be in the family business. go be you.
Absolutely.
Here's how we can support, and here's how we can all play together. I think
Yes.
that's amazing. I don't know that I've actually ever heard it put that way. That's
When
very
I
cool.
was when I was a kid, so I'm the oldest of four. I have three younger brothers, and my youngest brother and I are 12 years apart. And so when I was growing up, at first it was just my brother Austin and me. We're about 17 months apart. And that was pretty easy for my parents to keep up with. I mean, we were both hellions, but aside from that, organizationally, it's pretty easy, close in age, stick the kids in the car seat, whatever. If we're fighting over the front seat, it's just the two of us. But as we had Sam and Daniel, my dad, we started having a lot more conflict of just trying to figure out how to wrangle household stuff and what are the standards. So my dad used to do a thing that if we made good grades, we'd get a small prize. If you like make all A's, you get $20 or whatever.
Sure.
And of course, me being the firstborn, I was real nitpicky and was like, hey, I made the ace, you're gonna give me my money. And and over time, I became kind of the de facto rule keeper for some of this. But as you do, when you have kids, you can't remember what you said to the first one. You're going to say, yeah, whatever, it's the thing.
Sure.
And so eventually, my dad, in having to manage all four of us and trying to figure out discipline and like, okay, if you don't make your bed in the morning or if you don't do your chores, what's the consequence? Trying to make sure he remembered all those things. He created what he called the book of the law. And I love this and I use this with my clients so much. And what
Okay.
my dad finally said, okay, look, chore chart. First week of the month, it's Savannah's duty to take out the trash. Second week, it's Austin. Third week is Dan. Fourth week is Daniel's, for example. Right. And we've all agreed on a rolling schedule. And the consequences for not taking out the trash are X, that you
Mhm.
have to do it for the rest of the month. And we all agreed. My dad said, hey, this is the rule. Do we all agree that this is a fair consequence? And we all had to say, yeah, I think so. We dig that because we also all knew that the other people were going to forget and we didn't want to do it. So we're like, excellent. So we agreed. And then, and he's okay, great. We're going to put it in the book and we're all going to sign it. And we did. And
Okay.
sure enough, like 2 weeks later, one of us forgets and we end up, that person has to do the trash for the whole month. And they didn't like it. But man, each of us at some point forgot to take out the trash and then it was our job. But we had all agreed. So we reduced all of our conflict and fighting because we had all agreed on what the duty was and what the consequence was. Right.
Yeah.
And it just was a matter of you just got to show up and do it. So in the same way, there are ways to do that for households and again, like kids and cohorts. I used to actually be a nanny and I would do this with my households then. But you can do it also like in the family office setting of saying like, hey, we're all going to agree that we're,
Yeah.
for example, not going to discuss politics on social media. Right. And the
Yes.
consequence for this will be X. It will be, I agree to delete my post when a family member calls it out and take down whatever. And if it happens more than 3 times, then we will have something else, a discussion or a course or a get together and really hash it out by having everybody kind of in agreement. And this is kind of the purpose of those family constitutions as well, right? It's not just about the estate plan or the distributions. It's about how are we all going to stay cohesive as a family. We're all going to have a family retreat once a year and we're all going to make our best effort to get there or every other year or whatever. And so yeah, if you can utilize structure and say, hey, we all agree that these are the goals, or this is the task and the assignment, and these are the consequences or the desired outcomes, that is the thing that helps you prevent long-standing conflict later on. It's a lot easier to do in the first 3 to 4 generations. It gets harder as you have more precedent set and the younger generations may not understand. But that's also where in stewarding your relationships, you got to keep mentoring your folks, spending time together, bringing them back in, helping them understand, well, we set it up this way in the 1970s because there was an energy crisis. And then when that resolved, we actually felt like, you know what, this is a pretty good practice for us as a family to try to steward our electrical footprint, whatever it is.
Sure.
So,
Yeah.
being able to pass on that heritage and the rationale, because again, you're not teaching people what to think, you're teaching them how to think.
Mm. So very true. I talk about storytelling all the time with our families. It just take a video on your phone, tell
Mhm.
the story. How did you get here? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? Because those are the things that are going to get lost over the generations. And so much of what we do it because there's context,
Mhm.
or when we question something, we're questioning it because there's no context. I
Mhm.
mean, we do this in documents and entities, and certainly in relationships. Yeah. So I was going to ask you, do you have some like key takeaways that if there's a family listening and they're like, oh my gosh, I can see my family going this direction, or oh, we're in this, or oh, I don't want to be in this. Are there a couple of things that are, because I know it sounds so simple, you put a structure together? Of course. Like it makes sense when we're talking about it.
Yeah.
But the reality is this is not always an easy thing to do, especially when it doesn't come naturally to you.
Mhm.
So so my first question is, are there a couple of things that you would tell a family, like, here's some small, just take a step, just start. Doesn't
Yes.
have to be a big thing, just start. And then follow up to that is, when should a family or a family office consider really thinking about bringing you or someone like you into to really help guide them?
Yes. So first thing I'll say is like, if you're a family listening, you're like, oh my gosh, this is me, and we focused on all the business and stuff, but like, yeah, maybe things could be better with family. Like, one, just take a big breath, like sigh of relief. Like, look, it is okay. Like every single family gets here multiple times across their family journey, multiple times, and it's that iterative process. The second thing is like, it's really hard to coach yourself when you're on the field, and there is a time for playing the game and being on the field, and there's a time for coming off the field and doing the strategy, developing your playbook, figuring out who's going to be in what position and running practices, right?
Like you would do in a business.
Like you would do in a business, so if you can think about it like football, and start setting aside your time of being like, okay, this is like, yes, we're normal, like, because most people, they live in the game, they live on the field. You've got to take time away to do that strategy. You've got to think through, hey, what is the game here? What are the core players? Who needs to be in what? Are they ready as core players? Like maybe this person has like just a killer arm, but man, they're not fast enough. So what do we need to do to work on them as a player, and how do we coach that, right? If you are the family, the leader, kind of steering the either the development of the family office, which is not always first gen. Sometimes it's second gen coming in being like, or third gen, it's being like, hey, like we've got to get this stuff figured out. If that's you, then just know that you're going to have to carve out some separate time, and you're going to need to treat it like, give it the respect that it deserves and the time and attention, and it's going to function like an actual extra business. So you build out your playbook, build out your strategy, figure out who your core team players are, figure out who your second and third string people are, figure out if you need to recruit new players, some non-family advisors or whatever. And if you feel like that's too much to do all on your own, either you don't know how to do it, or it feels intimidating, or you're just tired and you're like, can somebody else please do this? That's when you bring in somebody else. There are coaches and consultants who will come help you structure some of this stuff, but I would say start with a family facilitator. If you can start with the family discussions, right? As you're talking through, like, well, we're kind of thinking about the estate plan, or we might want to branch off into a foundation or philanthropy ventures or whatever. You will have those discussions with the family facilitator, and then that will help inform you about what kind of operational discussions you need to be having. How do our core goals impact the structure we need to build? Now, who do we need to find in order to build this structure? So maybe if you want to build a philanthropic foundation, now you know, okay, I want it to focus on water rights and human trafficking and whatever else. So now you're going to go find the right people to help you build it, help you manage it, steward it, etc.
That's
So,
right.
but start with your family, because that is the thing that will blossom and bloom out into all of the other structural particulars. And if you don't start there, then what it ends up happening is you'll have, this person's structure and this person's structure and this person's structure, and you're going to have to go tie it all together later or break it apart, and it's gnarly. So save yourself the trouble. Start with the fun.
The pre-planning so you don't have to do the unwinding.
Yes. Yeah. Save yourselves a headache.
Save yourselves and everybody else sitting at the table the headache.
Yeah.
Awesome. Savannah, how can folks get in touch with you if they want to reach out and continue this conversation?
Absolutely. So you can go to schemaconsult.com and book a session with me. You can reach out. My email is savannah@schemaconsult.com. And love it.
Awesome. We will also link to your website and your email in the show notes. Savannah, thank you so much for joining us today. I so appreciate you taking the time to have a little chit chat with us. And I certainly hope that for the families, for the advisors, anybody in the family office world who was listening to us today, I hope that if nothing else, you took away that from this conversation that at the core of everything that we are all doing to push a family forward, it's to push the family forward. And family being at the top. So I hope you learned a little bit. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. And please reach out to Savannah if you have any questions or want to continue the conversation or are interested in hearing, how she might be able to help your family or your family office. So Savannah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Christi. This is awesome. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me today on the Family Office Success Podcast. I hope you found this conversation insightful and valuable as you navigate the complexities of family office services. If you're looking for more ideas or resources or want to explore how we can support your family office or your family through services and training and strategy, connect with me on LinkedIn or visit our website at whiteriverconsultants.com and be sure to subscribe to our newsletter for updates and expert insights. And if you're ready to take your family office to the next level, consider joining our mastermind where we can help you manage that chaos and create better outcomes for the families you serve. Until next time, I'm Christi Van Rite, and this has been the Family Office Success Podcast. Take care and keep building for the future.